I'll email, I'll contact them.
Yes, I'm going to let everyone in now. Got a few people coming in. Let's see. Ah, there's Dave. Hi, everybody. It's nice. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to this event, this launch event. Lovely to see you all here. So yes, so tonight it's gone 7 o'clock, so I might as well get started. Tonight we are finally launching issue 8 of the magazine. Here it is. Some of you will have it. Some of you will be waiting for it. It is on its way to you. It might be held up by the Easter weekend, and we are actually having to go into a second print run as well. So we will be waiting a little bit longer for some of the sales. But yes, it's winging its way out to you. And it's lovely that you have given up your evenings, your bank holiday evenings, to come and see this and celebrate with us. Spelt is a absolute labour of love, and it is just because our margins are so fine. Anything that goes wrong with the magazine knocks us off our balance and causes disruptions right through. So Helen and Steve and I have been working really hard to get this magazine out, and it's been really delayed. It was delayed because we had the Arts Council application, and we did not get the money for that, which is fine. We don't rely on Arts Council funding. However, it would have helped us to give us a cash injection to move us forward faster. So at the minute we are sort of inching along. So any support you can give us in terms of sharing our posts on social media, buying a PDF for a friend, or buying a hard copy of the magazine is very, very much appreciated. Tonight we have got contributors. We haven't got Steve with us tonight. He's poorly tonight, unfortunately. So there's just me and Helen. And tonight we are going to have contributors from the magazine. We've got some fantastic poets. And we also got, she hasn't arrived yet, but she will be here later, Victoria Bennet, whose brilliant, brilliant book, All My Wild Mothers, is out now and you should buy it. I'm going to share a couple of links in the chat once we get going, probably at half time. And I think we probably should make a start on getting our readings. Is everyone happy? Is everyone happy? Can you all hear me all right and see me all right? Oh yeah, the other thing that we've got tonight, which is really exciting, is our very first poetry film. If you get the magazine, you'll be able to see
on the screen, because the sound's terrible with the connection.
Have that muted. If you buy the magazine, you will see that we have what is it? A QPR? Is it a QPR code in it? Is that what it's called? QR code. You can tell that Steve handles this sort of thing. And if you click on that with your phone, it will take you to a video of our first magazine poetry film. Helen's going to introduce that. We're going to attempt to play it live for you in the launch tonight. And we'll see how that works. Okay, I think that's everything. If you get knocked offline, use the same link to get back in, and I will use the same link to set this up again. Your stop video and your mute buttons are in your bottom left-hand corner if you need to use them. I will be muting you all once we get to the readings, but do feel free to chat in the chat, because our lovely readers will really appreciate your feedback. And if you wanted to save the chat, you can just press those 3 little buttons and they will, there's a save button, you can save it somewhere on your computer. Okay. All right. All right, let's get going. First up then, tonight we have Dave Wakely. Wakely, am I pronouncing that properly?
Oh. Hello.
Hello. You're going to be reading your poem tonight. You're reading Bletting on page 27. Bletting. Let's have a look at it. There's usually two of us doing all this, by the way, so forgive me for my clumsiness. Oh, yes. This is an absolutely stunning poem, just really, really beautiful. I'm going to let you go ahead, Dave, and introduce it and read it for yourself. Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to be here, and feels like a ridiculous honour to be reading first. This was a poem written about this time last year. I'm speaking to you from Milton Keynes, which has a reputation for being a concrete nightmare, but actually has an awful lot of really beautiful parkland that's very well maintained, including some rather lovely lakes, a few minutes walk from our house, called the Teardrop Lakes. That's where inspiration for this struck. Letting. Time rows us away from the depths of winter now, though we still bail its waters from the bilges of our creaking, leaky vessels, its chilly damp lingering in our trouser legs. Anxiety is blessed by a season's overthinking, its optimism that navigates us onward now. Each tiny pop of blossom bud burst, a baby's breath in our deflating water wings, a tiny gust into our tattered sails, propelling us on to the opposite shore, where the bark break glimmer of the first new leaves hangs around the twig tips like smoke.
That's absolutely beautiful, and I just love all those sort of sensory images that are running through it. Just gorgeous, lovely use of language. Thank you so much, Dave. Really, really.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Got Sue up next. Sue, who is on page 3. And you have this very, very beautiful poem. And one of the things that struck me about this one is the fantastic use of end-stopped lines in it. So I'm really excited to hear you reading this, Sue.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. It's lovely to be here. I love Spelt and I love the Spelt launch. They're lovely evenings. This is actually taking us a long way from Milton Keynes to almost the very top of Scotland at that time of year when it's almost light all night. This is Acree's Gill, the season of midnight birdsong. Awake in the midnight light, I go into the garden. The air is tide-turn still. My husband sleeps beside an open window. I hear his slow breath, sigh in, sigh out. A deer stands just beyond the fence, taut as a baited trap. We watch each other steadily in the undark. I hear her slow breath, sigh in, sigh out. Around us, dusk-washed green hills rise to a near blue sky. The breeze crumples our reflections over the lock. I go into the house to sleep.
It's absolutely superb, and those end-stop lines just slow it down so much and give that pause on every single moment in that poem. It's just gorgeous. Really, really nicely done. Thank you, Sue.
Thank
you. Okay. We are probably going to finish early tonight, so we are rattling through these. Let's have a look. We've got Jane up next. Have we got Jane here?
Yes.
Jane, there she is. Hi. Now,
Hi.
This is a poem called Industry, and really it should be Steve introducing this one because we have a section in the magazine called Urban Rural, and what we like to do is to find that intersection between nature and the urban environment. So Steve is the person that reads these poems. I'm really, really pleased that you're able to come and read for us tonight, Jane, with this fantastic poem. Can't wait to hear it. Take it away.
Thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate all your extra efforts to bring this issue to press. I live in quite an industrial village. It has an industrial past and quite an abiding industrial present. And nature needs no encouragement to worm its way into the most urban of settings. So that's really the inspiration behind this poem. Industry. Spring and snow still smooths the rough edges of the demolished sugar factory. It's a temporary solution, but you should have seen it last summer. Hedge mustard and sow thistle, willow herb and buddleia, colonising brick rubble, broken concrete, the nectar bar a buzz, as if production could be measured by the frequency of wing beats.
Just wonderful and really beautifully read as well. I do like it when you hear a poet read, and because you read it on the page, you read a poem on the page and it sounds so different in your head, and then when they come to read it, they know it like intimately, and it was just a real pleasure to hear you read that, Jane. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have got Chris. Chris, can you hear me? Can I hear you?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Now
Fabulous.
then, you've got your poem. I've got your poem here. It's on page 26 and it's got an absolutely fantastic title. And I think that was the first thing that drew me to this one. So I'm really excited to hear you read it. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Wendy. First of all, the joy of when you get an acceptance. I don't know the other poets, I'm sure you do. It's one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. So thank you for that, and thank you for Spelt and all of that. Yeah, this is acclimatizing by the snout of the Bering Glacier. The Bering Glacier is in the Hindu Kush. It's about 12,000 feet, and I went there 30 years ago. And obviously, if you're that high up, you've got to hang around to wait for your body to acclimatize. For some people, that never happens, and their head's in danger of exploding, and they have to go down again. But I was okay. But you're 3 or 4 days with you just got to sit outside your tent. So, and I was reading Moby Dick up there and looking down on the river below. It was beautiful, and I thought originally the poem was going to be about that, but it went its own way. So you can follow that path right now. Acclimatizing by the snout of the Bering Glacier. Camped out on a grassy shelf, waiting for our blood to build, we measure the day by the turning shadows. The Chinese test their guns across the divide, each report stretched out, sad as whale song. Sunlight the ridge orange as it falls. Violet mountains turn iron black as the day goes out, and the wind comes down cold. Watching for meteor trails as the constellations shift, we eat canned cheese and sardines on flatbreads from the fire. The long night moves over us. Tents glow green and yellow, and then dark. In the deep night, the zigzag of a torch pulling someone to the latrine. Animal eyes flash platinum in the battery light. A toad come up from the deep grass. The night sounds are small here. In the unbroken black, the terrible clarity of things left undone. People not cared enough about to keep. The futile vanity of ascent.
That was absolutely stunning. And do you know what? I love a poem that takes you somewhere. And I found your explanation of it absolutely fascinating. It's one of those poems where you travel. I like writing where you can sort of ride on the back of the person and go with them into these experiences. And it's so atmospheric. It's just beautiful. Thank you so much for being a part of the magazine and for your kind words as well. Excuse me. Right. Well, this is exciting. I'm going to hand you over to lovely Helen now, who is going to introduce our film poet and our film poem, and let's keep our fingers crossed that nothing goes wrong and we get to see it. All right, Helen, over to you.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It will be fine. Thanks, Wendy. It's really a joy to introduce poetry film to Spelt this evening. We opened the first poetry film submission toward the end of last year, and it's been an absolute pleasure to me to watch the films that were submitted. I watched each one at least twice, many more than twice. And there was such a huge variety in style and approach, and many excellent films. And any one of them, frankly, would have been fitting to publish in Spelt. I chose Making an Orchard by Maeve O'Hare because I returned to it many times. There was something about it that grabbed my interest and my heart. And when I watch a poetry film, and I've watched many over the years, I want to feel some draw, some pull, some emotion. And I certainly did with this film. Maeve and I conducted an online interview, just a few questions that I sent to Maeve. And such is the nature of Spelt. I now have a new friend, and I think that poetry film can do that, but also Spelt, just by its friendly nature. So that's been a real added bonus for me. Maeve might tell you later on how she feels, but but for me that's been a real bonus that I hadn't anticipated. We're going to watch the film now, and then I'm going to ask Maeve to say a few brief words about writing the poem, and how, perhaps why, that particular poem became a poetry film. So I will just share my screen. You should all be able to see that now.
One foot down, a shovel at a time, I planted an orchard during the cold March wind of 2010. River-silted clay upturned and aerated, then a bare-rooted apple tree placed and patted into soil from the lush Golden Vale. A gift from the Midlandian Ice Age, the climate movers of long ago. We have them to thank for soil so rich in all that's good. Early Paleozoic shale and old red sandstone, making fine loamy drift of limestone and sand. I kept shoveling and planting until 206 old Irish apple trees had found a new home in this wrinkled soil. My hands like boulders, frozen and numbed like my mind, trying to work it all out. With two small children in a place more lukewarm than not. You were 2 years dead, the three of us now, finding new ways in a straitened world. Apples from a bygone age, grafted onto strong rootstock, so brawny against the life cycles of nature and of man. Keeping these varieties alive, part of our heritage is saved for another 100 years. Ard Cairn Russet, an apple for desserts. Discovered in 1890 from a garden in Cork, now here. Ballyvaughan, an apple for the cooks. Discovered in County Clare. Pale yellow, pink flush, now here. Dick Davies, another Cork garden. Mrs. Rawley's seed from the 1900s. Conical in shape, carmine in colour, now here. Gibbon's russet with flattened apex and rounded base. This cider apple from 1802, found in Dublin, Cork and Meath, now here. Kerry Pippin, sweet and aromatic for eating and desserts, grown in many counties, now here. Kilkenny Pearmain for tart and for cider, orange red flush with red stippling, found in 1873, now here. Loch tree, found in an orchard in Wexford. Crimson stripes, downy skin, rescued forever, now here. Scarlet Crofton, a medieval find from Sligo, first grown in the 1500s. Angular and scarlet, now here. Now I stand and watch them, strong against the sky, and I think you would be proud. They give organic fruit in early autumn and pink blossom in the spring. My children, like the apple trees, in love and concord, have grown up now, but will remember the planting time of these old Irish saplings in a cold March field in 2010.
So yeah, such a lovely film, isn't it? I'm sure you'll all agree. I was interested actually. Dave commented, answered a question about the word bletting, and the crossover with that film was really interesting because Dave said I came across bletting as a word when I discovered a community orchard a couple of miles away with medlar trees. So it's nice to have that connection as well, that lovely word. So Maeve, do you mind telling us something about how you came to write the poem, and also particularly how that poem ended up as a poetry film?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Helen for choosing the film, and for Wendy and everybody else who's involved with the magazine. Thank you so much for choosing my film, poetry film. And we are firm friends from now on, Helen, that's for sure. Well, I wrote the poem in 2021. I had no inkling that I would be turning it into a poetry film at the time. And I'm nearly finished a degree in writing and literature at Atlantic Technological University in Sligo, the Yates Academy. And I had a teacher there, lecturer there, Alice Lyons, for the poetry module. And she was saying to me, you should really add something of yourself to the poem as well, not just have it factual, because it was originally quite a factual documentation of the creation of the orchard. So I did, and it really turned it into something, a little bit extra. And then I performed it at the Word, at the local library in Sligo. They had a poetry session every month, and it was quite animated, at that, and people really loved it. So then I said I'd turn it into a poetry film then the next year, because I had become interested in poetry and film. So that's how it really all happened.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well worth doing that. Before I hand back to Wendy, I just want to encourage anyone who has a phone or a camera just to pick it up and make a poetry film. Just try it, because if you haven't tried it, until you try it, you don't know what dimensions that can bring to your poetry. And if you are interested, if you go onto the Spelt website, you'll find a page there with some information about how to get started. So thank you, Wendy, thank you, Maeve, thank you everyone for watching that film, and some wonderful comments in the chat.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you, Maeve. That is just such a stunning creation. And I love the pace of it. It's slow, and that score sort of underpinning that slowness and that thought process. It's just beautiful and beautifully created. It's just a really great choice. And I looked at the films as they were coming in the submissions before I passed them on to Helen, and they were really, really high quality. I was quite surprised by how many we got as submissions, but also what quality that they were. And we've been very lucky to have Helen running some workshops for us on poetry film. We'll have some more from it, I hope, if she can manage it. And I do, yeah, definitely encourage anyone to have a go at it, because I do think it's a really interesting merging of two different artistic disciplines, in visual and the poetic, the literary. And it's something that we want to explore further and do some more work with. We don't see anyone else doing it, and I think it's one of those areas that needs more stuff. It seems to lend itself very well to nature poetry as well. So thank you, Maeve, and congratulations on being our very first poetry film in the magazine. And thank you, Helen, for all your hard work that you've put into it.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay. All right, where are we? We are running ahead of ourselves by quite some way, never mind. We have got Nairn Kennedy there. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, that's fine, thank you. It's had all sorts of pronunciations in its time, and that's the best one so far, I think.
Oh, brilliant. And you are going to read your poem on page 16, Benchmark.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I will hand over to you and look forward to listening to it. Thank you, Nairn.
Okay. Well, can I, like everybody else, kick off by saying thank you very much for selecting my poem to be in the magazine, and it's lovely to be in such distinguished company as well with it. The poem's really about, I think, an experience we've all had, which is that round about where I am in Leeds, there are quite a few country parks, and you go for walks in these, and as you go along there are benches, and the benches are commemorating people, you know, who are loved ones of families and so on. And it's sometimes very interesting and sometimes a very sad thing to see. So that's really what it's about here. Benchmark. Somewhere off the track, there's the racket of a woodpecker butting hollow logs. Somewhere a squirrel slinks down a trunk. Somewhere up there, the sun burns off the fog, harlequins the path in hopscotch pools of light, fires up the quartz glint in the gritstone rocks, wipes the pallor off the wooden benches strung beside the path, points up the words engraved along their spines, these timber rosaries. Matthew Bolton was a husband, father, lifelong friend. Anne Overton, her family's guide and lighthouse, gone before her time. James, Alan, Julie, Beth and Lee, all sadly missed. And on a single bench below a beach, here he sat and listened to the trees.
Nairn, that's absolutely gorgeous. And is it a sonnet?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a beautifully crafted sonnet as well. It's just stunning. That last line, oh, just gorgeous. And we're so lucky to have this sort of poetry in the magazine and to have such high quality poetry submitted to us. So thank you so much for being a part of the magazine. And it looks beautiful on the page as well. And beautifully read as well, I should add. Thank you. Okay. Sophia, there you are. Is it Sophia or Sophia? Sophia, that's right, I am pronouncing it right.
Yeah, Sophia.
And you are on page 10 of the magazine. Honestly, this magazine, when we were putting it together, we do generally get very high quality submissions, but I think in this submissions period, we did seem to get really super high quality. So I don't know if people had like recently been rejected from a competition or something and sent us all their competition poems. Anyway, I'm waffling. Sophia, oh, I can't wait to hear this. Yeah, go ahead, introduce it. Let's see what you have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And this hadn't been sent anywhere before Spelt, so you were my first choice for it. So maybe others had gone out to competitions, but this one was sent straight to you. And this was written last year when I was thinking a lot about the cheery subjects of loss and grief and mortality and climate change. So, you know, all the cheery subjects. But this came from that, and it's called Measurements. If I'm to live as long as my mother, whose lifespan stretched 77 years, I have 33 left after 44 already lived. It all seems insignificant if compared to the Parthenon that stood 2,468. But age is just a number, right? The pyramids at 4,500 must be wearying of existence, must be wondering why humans can't stop asking questions. Mount Everest has overseen the world for more than 50 million years, watched us mess it all up while scrambling to climb her slopes to prove something we can't define. It's already several hundred years since the last wolf was killed in Scotland, in Killiecrankie or on the River Findhorn. No one can be sure. The same river where I saw an otter maybe 30 years ago. The same river I swam in with frozen limbs and numb toes, where we took picnics, my mother making fire, the last wolf long gone. Now they're talking of reintroducing the lynx. They're worried for the capercaillie. The red squirrel is still under threat. All I want is to go back to the river, dip my hands in the freezing water, find my mother and the otter waiting for me, do as little damage as I can.
Really beautiful, thank you.
Thank you.
I think poets are drawn to this sort of, I don't know how to explain it, where we tend to examine time points and draw them together. We're always looking backwards into the past. And I think this use of the numbers running through this poem works so well to sort of pinpoint these areas and to sort of quantify them and control them. Everything's very controlled in the poem. And then you get to this last part and it's just so deep with emotion. It's just beautiful, just gorgeous. Thank you so much, and beautifully read as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're more than welcome. All right, we are going to take a break now, a 10-minute break, and we will be back after the break with a couple more readers, 3 or 4 more readers, and then we've got the fantastic Victoria Bennet who's going to read to us from her beautiful book. So I shall see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay, everybody, go and recharge your glasses. Okay. Hi, everybody. We are back for our second half. If you have a look in the chat, I've just put a link up to the Spelt shop where you can buy copies of the magazine, subscribe to the magazine, buy the PDFs if you so wish. And I've also put a link up to the Poetry Pharmacy, who currently have a little discount on books. And you can order Vic's wonderful book from there. There it is. It's gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. Excuse me. Some lovely comments on the poetry and the work that we've had so far tonight. It really, really makes me very, very proud of magazine when I see people enjoying it, and I see how much people enjoy being in it as well as contributors. So thank you for your kindnesses. Okay. Moving on. We have got Judy next. Judy, there she is. Hello, Judy. I know Judy, she's in my stanza group, so it was really, really nice to have submissions from her and to be able to feature it in the magazine, because it is just a lovely, lovely poem. So Judy, do you want to introduce it and read it for us?
Thank you, Wendy. I was absolutely thrilled to get it published. And it's the first poem I've had published, so I'm really pleased. Whether I'll get another one ever, but I don't know. However, this was a poem inspired by a holiday in Northumbria. It's called The Lad. They gave way to youth, loaded it on his broad shoulders, even while aware of his longing to be uncouth, played jokes on pals, flashed smiles at every lass in the dreary town. Barely a teen when all the men in his life left. Grandfather passed on, father walked on, uncle, playing silly beggar, got it on with a gamekeeper's wife. Now the lad is stepping up, given skills by the women, driving the flock and tractors, repairing dry stone walls. He's up before larks on market day, late to bed with owls. Not yet old enough to drink with adults, should go to night school, though he never attends. He's coarse, pragmatic, but tells tales of nesting swallows, the drama of orchestral flight. One Sunday afternoon, leaning over the farm gate, we watch, amused, as he welds a broken baler. A radio plays, and he sings over loud, tuneless, to all the top 10 pop parade. Later, an eager sheepdog at his back, he strikes out on his red quad bike. Arms held wide across the handlebar, he rises on the pedals, manoeuvres, wheels around mounds and hollows, swearing at strays, daft as fluff, scattering across the rough fields. In the twilight gloom, we hear his rude holler, "Come here, you bastards." To some it sounds like jubilation.
Fabulous. And I just know there's going to be many, many more poems published by you, Judy. God, what an honour to be your first publication. I don't think I'd realised that this was your first one. Well done. It is, do you know what? It's the hardest thing in the world to send your poems out and place yourself in a place of vulnerability to do that and face rejection or acceptance. It's hard. Every poem that people write, all literary art, all art really has, whether you're writing about yourself or not, has a part of you in it. So when you send your work out, you make yourself vulnerable. So thank you for taking that risk with us. And I'm so pleased to have it in. It's so atmospheric. And I just feel like I know this person. I feel like he would be one of the people from my village, you know, riding around on his quad bike on the lambing fields. I just absolutely love everything about it. Feels familiar. Feels like home.
Thank you, Wendy.
So much,
I love it being in this beautiful magazine. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Excuse me. I'm trying to shake off a chest infection at the minute and it will not go. So apologies for my croakiness and my coughing. Okay, we have got Claire next. Claire Walker. There you are. Hello. Hi. Hi. Oh, I know which one this is. Page 21, I think.
Yeah, page 21.
Oh, Stag. Oh, this is a great poem. I can't wait. Take it away.
Thanks, Wendy. And just to begin by echoing the other readers, really, just it's a delight to be in this issue of Spelt. And it's a joy to hear all the other poems. It kind of really brings them to life, doesn't it, to hear them at a launch and kind of celebrate it together. So thank you ever so much, Wendy, for yours, and Steve and Helen's hard work. It's a beautiful magazine. And so, yes, my poem is called Stag, and it's based on a childhood memory of a holiday in Bournemouth when I think I was about 7 or 8. And it's, something that's really stuck in my mind. Stag. This is how I remember it. Menacing jewel of the beetle's back, dried crust of metallic green, hardened oil slick spot. His antlers cut from the devil's own fork, muscled prongs spewing from the sides of his head. Treacherous pavement, agreeing him room to scuttle-struck cracks as he day trips on hard ground, away from mulchy undergrowth, hidden scrub. This is how I remember it. My mother carrying me home while I held on, afraid to share the ground with him.
Thank you so much. That is wonderful. I absolutely love that repetition of this is how I remember it. And it's creating that bridge right through the poem, right across the poem. It's just fab, just gorgeous. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Okay. Oh, Birdie Lawson. Birdie, where are you? There she is. Settle in. It's a long one.
Hi, everybody. Same as everybody else, thank you, Wendy, for many things. This is a picture of my landscape, actually. I'm very lucky. I've lived here for 50 years. It's a story told by an old uncle to a young girl. Young girl becomes old woman. Old woman tells it to a not so young girl. Not so young girl becomes old woman, me. We're all ghosts. Okay. Ghostwriter and all the arts of life, they changed into the arts of death in Albion. William Blake. From his poem Jerusalem, chapter 65, written in 1804. All the earth is turning red, Peggy. He turned, shook her hand, always the gentleman, hung the ash stick in the crook of his arm, cigarette in his mouth, turned again, squinted across the vast field of ploughed earth. I like to stand here and look at the old place. Be nice to see a few horses, men about. And after a long pause, he added, but surprised what kindness there be in the world. After the sale, he didn't even know. People he didn't even know had come, mumbling something about how
Birdie, you muted.
when did that happen?
Oh, I don't know, sorry. I think you did it to yourself.
I don't know how that happened.
Carry on.
And yes, both were happy, had plenty to do. There was an orchard and bit of a garden, a porker for Christmas and fowls for eggs. Still, new days, new ways. With that, he lifted his well-worn Battersby, strode away down the track. We first met Peggy in 1973. We were house hunting, popped into her pub. She didn't do food, but made us a cup of tea and a cheese sandwich. 12 months later, she walked the 2.5 miles along the bones of the ridge, and I returned that cuppa. Peggy, born 1909 and related to half the village, continued her tale. Howards had farmed the 1,500 acres, the land we now look down on, for generations, had been chairman of many bigwig county things, employed more than 30 men full-time, was well respected, whole hamlet depended on him, a master farmer of the old school, spreading muck on his land, and paid gangs to weed by hand each spring. Then came the crash, followed by the depression, which lasted until the war, and a bewildered William Howard saw his beautiful horses and cattle, all his wagons, implements, every stick of furniture displayed, poked and prodded. Only once had he tried to explain forlornly that his flock of breeding ewes had been an entity for a century, nevertheless bundled and sold in lots of 4. The new owner was young, Newman. He had stood legs astride, bought nothing, wanted nothing, only the land, needed none of the village workers standing by. That same day, 3 tractors with ploughs, harrows and drills of a huge size, never seen hereabouts, came up from the station. Next morning, before full light, the tractors were at plough, and come nightfall, headlights were switched on and ploughing continued. The whole hamlet, in miserable depression, watched as patches of light crept to and fro, a coldness creeping over the blackness of the valley. During the winter, the tractors grubbed out hedges that had been William Howard's pride and joy. There will be no small fields, Newman declared, no sheep, no need of shade. The giant walnut trees, the apple orchard, the sweet chestnuts, all fell. A few who could afford to were given the chance to purchase their property, small holdings and tied cottages. Some of Peggy's family had lived in this house. A mother of 2 young sons died of a heart attack aged 42. Her husband, who had purchased a small parcel of land, depressed, couldn't cope, had hung himself in the barn. The land was sold again separately. The small fields of sweet grass and wild herbs became one large wet field on the slope. The village witch doctor, botanist and doctor's wife, who lived just the other side of the ridge, told me how she would pick the tiny yellow tubes of cowslips from those damp meadows to make a mild sedative, a sleeping draught for insomniacs, and when required, a strong infusion from the beautiful blue bugle for hangovers. We had bought the house and some small unwanted buildings. Estate agent blurb had read, ripe for development, and I had fallen in love with a view, a long potholed track down from the ridge, and a scented rose growing over a sandstone slab coal house roof. Hanging on a black cobwebbed wall was an old tin bath, which we would use for several years, every Sunday evening by the fire, all 4 of us by turns, and finally the dog in the same water. My boys went to the village school, now closed. School grounds sold for housing, known as locals as Millionaires Row. We have famous residents, small cottages taken as weekend retreats. Perhaps this is the way of all revolutions, industrial, agricultural, and technical. Folks get left behind. Speed and greed sap the soil, the communities, the connection with environment, tradition and memory. William Blake called it single vision, not so much what is seen, but what is missed. And in ignorance, to view a small portion and think that all. The wheel continues to turn. Welcome is the practice of no-till farming, apparently an idea from the 1940s. The field next door, a huge ploughed field when we moved here, is partitioned into 3 with fully grown trees and their water-holding roots. The middle section is an apple orchard with undershelf of grass and thistles for sheltering sheep. The top third, next to the ridge, has been newly planted with beans. A few centimetres of harrowing, then seed straight into the stubble of last year's barley. Are you following the development of elms, environmental land management? After trashing the soil, we are trying again, learning, and hopefully it is not too late. The soil no longer eroded, less dust and nasties are carried on the wind. It is no longer red. New days, new ways. Sorry it's so long.
No, don't apologise. It was just beautiful storytelling. And you read it. It's really difficult to read a long piece out loud. And you did it beautifully. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I was just saying in the chat that the book that I'm working on at the minute that I'm writing, I've just been looking at the Enclosure Act and the enclosure of the land around where I live. And this removal of hedges and trees and the expansion of the fields of it. And I can see it myself that people are now, you now seeing these enormous piles of manure in the fields because people are going back to spreading sort of natural muck on the fields and changing the way the fields are. So it's such a great exploration of this sort of cycle and this history going round. And you can't rewild it though. You can't rewild yourselves. You can't do it. You can't bring back what's lost. So really wonderful, really wonderful. If you get a chance to read it in the magazine, it's beautiful. And Birdie, I've worked with on courses and workshops before, and she's just an absolute master of the white space and of creating pauses within a body of work. And this is very similar to that. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. Now on to Margaret. Margaret, there she is. And you are on page 4.
Yeah.
With Vanishing Point, is it? Yes, it is. Oh, another one with some gorgeous pause in it. Take it away.
And if I can just say, you know, to add to everybody else, thank you very much, Wendy, for including this poem. Spelt is a magazine I've wanted to be in for a long time, so thank you very, very much. So this is really a little bit of where I live in the Malverns in Worcestershire. And it's looking out of the window that's actually behind me in my kitchen to a point on the hills where I walk every day. And I do the same walk every day. And people say to me, why do you do that? Because I've got 2 dogs, 2 beagles, and they say, why don't you vary it? And I say, because it's not a walk, it's a meditation. And I find that the whole thing, I just can leave the dogs, they go off, they run around, and they know where we're going and what we're doing. And for me, I get back to at the end of the circle and something has changed in my head, and it happens every day, so I never change it. That's where I'm looking at in this poem. And it's called Vanishing Point. At dusk's vanishing point, the square metre of the Worcester beacon I see through the kitchen window, fading through purples to charcoal, where the hawthorn that's now gone used to stagger, and where my ashes will settle with all my beagles, is where I watch the lamp of a cyclist pop in and out of contours below the orb of the grazier, calling the herd to feed.
Just marvellous, just absolutely marvellous. And another one that I felt a sort of a relationship with, because this is something that I do as well. I walk the same walk daily, And it is a meditative practice. You see the tiniest changes in things and you notice things, and the plants and the animals and the trees become almost like friends to you. I just love it. It just spoke to me, and really beautifully read as well. So thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me. We are moving on to our guest reader, Vic. There she is. Now, we have an interview in every issue of Spelt magazine, but I was particularly excited to have this one because a little bit biased, because I worked with Vic on this book, in fact, and some poetry very, very early on in its development. So I feel like I've seen it from conception, and now here it is birthed in all its gorgeous, hard-backed, physical physicality into the world. So I'm really, really chuffed. And the interview is really interesting, but I just will ask Vic a few questions about it before she does some reading from it. Vic, can you just briefly tell us what the idea behind the book is? Briefly, tell us the whole book.
Briefly. The book spans the 10 years that it took to write. So it's a slow growing book. And I like to think that it says on the tin what it is, because it says motherhood, loss and an apothecary garden. So it was 10 years of my life of being a mother and of loss and of growing an apothecary garden in what was an old industrial site in the social housing estate where I moved to with my young son and husband. That it's also really, I suppose, a pilgrimage of grief, and a journey towards healing and a discovery of what grows in those broken places, sort of personally and literally in the ground.
Yeah. And it is a really beautifully produced book as well. Each of the chapters is titled with a type of plant. And these little illustrations are gorgeous as well that are running through it. And it's one of those books where you are sort of drawn to the personal. It's just really, really nicely joined together, merged, this idea of the natural and the personal and the healing plants. The way that you've done that and brought those two ideas, those two things together, it's just superb. And I would just highly recommend it to anyone who wants to read a really decent book. And we are just really, really lucky to have Vic here giving up her time. Is it Shetland that you're living in?
Orkney, not quite as brave to go to Shetland,
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I opted for the Southern Isle.
Yeah, and you've just not long moved there, have you? You've only just moved there.
No, after 25 years in Cumbria, we moved here in late November. So
In
not
the
been here
middle of
at all for
winter.
very long.
That's a very brave thing to do, to move up there in the middle of winter, just as your book's coming out as well. But I have to say that here's the power of Zoom, that we can be talking to you all in this sort of fairly isolated place, and it's almost like you're just sitting in the room with us. It's fantastic. I love Zoom. Right, I'm going to stop waffling now. I'm going to hand over to you, Vic, to do some reading from your book and to just tell us as you're reading along what it is and where it's come from and anything you want to. Shut up, Wendy. Let her go on with it.
No, never shut up, Wendy. Never. I just have to, I'm going to stick a big thank you in here because this book wouldn't exist without Wendy. She says, that's not true, but it is true. Because I very, very, very shyly showed her this writing that I've been doing in these 10 years. I didn't set out to write a book at all. I just started writing bits. I previously wrote poetry, so I can't believe I've written so many words, actually. I think I've used them all up. But Wendy encouraged me to see them as a whole piece, so, and encouraged me to believe in their right to exist. So I'm not going to tell you to shut up, Wendy. I'm going to tell you to keep talking and keep encouraging people because you're amazing. So, so I thought I would start at the beginning. I won't read you the whole book because you'll be here forever. But I thought maybe it would be helpful if I started with the first chapter. And it begins in 2012, and it was, my son was 4 years old at that point, and it was 4 years after my sister had drowned. My eldest sister drowned when I was 7 months pregnant with my son, and that was a long grief that is woven very much through the book. Rose Bay willow herb, Cimmerian angusto, I can never say this word, Cimmerian angusto. I'm just going to actually forget this. I did this last time. I can't actually read the Latin word, the botanical word, so I'm going to forget it. So Rose Bay willow herb, passion fire, fireweed, bombweed, bloodvine, used to release stuck energy. Rose Bay willow herb gained its common name of bombweed after its prolific growth on urban bomb sites during the Blitz. A pioneer species, it is one of the first plants to grow in areas devastated by fire. It is antispasmodic, antimicrobial, antiviral, and astringent, and can be used as a tea or wash to treat urinary and gastric complaints, asthma, whooping cough, burns, ulcers, and other skin irritations. The stem can be used topically on infected wounds and boils to draw out poison. Rose Bay willow herb grows virulently in disturbed and scorched ground. The woman under the stairs is not me. I need her to leave. Excavating levels of personal archaeology, I unearth faded love letters tied up with string, a green velvet smoking jacket from pre-parenthood days, a bag of baby outfits saved for the future children I never had, an old leather suitcase filled with family photographs, and 34 years worth of journals stained with the ink of 6 million words. I keep digging until this stranger expands herself into the room, filling the floor. I am suffocated by her lives. She has to go. Today is that day. I call on a friend for help. She arrives with chocolate cake, cardboard boxes, and heavy-duty refuse sacks. A member of the Wild Women group, we have been friends for 13 years. When I need help, she is ready with wild wisdom and practical support. Where do we start? She asks, perching herself on the arm of an overcrowded sofa. I look around, unsure where to begin. She picks out a magenta feather boa from the box, dust scattering into the air. Let's start with this, she says. It's for poetry readings. I might need it, I tell her. Yes, but do you need it now? She asks, cutting me short. No, I say. It is a relic of another life. Truth is, I do not need any of this now. Why hold on to things when I cannot keep hold of the people I love? We divide the artifacts of my life into 4 piles. Keep, recycle, throw away, burn. As I sort, my son watches from the corner of the room. He is 4 and delights at these new discoveries, salvaging toys and trinkets from the growing mounds. For him, this unveiling offers excitement and the possibility of treasure. For me, it feels like the flaying away of skin, layer after layer, leaving me raw. I rip out the pages from my journals, deleting memories that betray me with their blind hope. I tear up the fading snapshots, 4 sisters smiling back at me from saturated Kodak frames. When I look at them, I see what is to come. I wish I could say something to change the course of what is already written, but I am Cassandra, cursed by the knowledge of a future that they would not believe. My eldest sister, so alive in those photographs, is dead. I file the photographs and the notebooks under burn. Once we are done, we build a pyre in the garden. It's as big as a tractor, my son declares. He measures most things by tractor scale. He is puzzled by what is happening and asks why I am throwing all our things on the fire. I tell him that we can't take everything with us to the new home, that sometimes we have to let things go. Even this? He asks, reluctantly handing over the one-armed, one-eyed teddy bear I treasured as a child. I hesitate, seeing his small hand wrapped around its paw, an echo of my own. The past tugs at me, asking to be saved. No, I will not listen. I take the bear from his hands, stretch up, and put it on the top, an effigy to a person that no longer exists. It tilts its misshapen head in a question, a single eye unblinking. Even this, I say. My friend leads my son back to the house. She knows this is something I must do alone. I light a match to the memory tinder and watch it burn. The heat stings, but I do not turn away. I will be witness to this furious end. In the morning, my son wakes early. He wants to see the big fire. We leave my husband sleeping and go out into the garden. The night cloud still clings to the valley, a pale sun cresting the Pennines to the east. There is a lingering trace of smoke, but no fire. All gone now, Mummy, all gone, my son tells me, part wistful and part impressed. The early September breeze blows the ghost pages away, leaving only shadows behind. A dark ring remains where I have burned my life. I kneel on the damp ground and touch the ash, feel the echo of flame. In this time of death, so much has been lost. It is time to move on, to see what might live again. I pull my son close and kiss his cheek. He is uncertain of this change, which takes away his future and his past. Come on, let's see what seeds we can find from the new house. We can plant a garden there, I say. He smiles and takes my hand, and together we walk, gathering calendula, corncockle, columbine and willow herb into our palms. There will be flowers again. Thank you. So when we moved, it was 2012, and it was sort of deep austerity, trying to make a living as creative people. And my son had been diagnosed at 2 with type 1 diabetes, so I was a full-time carer as well. And there had been other losses in my family. So we moved into a new build social housing estate that had been built over an old stoneworks. And it was nothing like the future I'd imagined for us. Motherhood hadn't been how I'd imagined, and it felt very much like everything had broken, things kept dying, and we moved into this home that had nothing growing in it. It just had a patch of lawn, well, a patch of grass that had been sown over the rubble. And I knew that I had to try and grow something. I had to see what would live there. So my son and I started coming up with plans for this wild garden, but we had absolutely no money. So there was a couple of things. It had to be sustainable. It had to be free. So we knew the plants that we planted in there, really, they were going to be the things that other people threw out of their gardens, the things other people dug up, and the weeds that were growing on what was still a construction site, because the housing estate hadn't been finished at that point. Needless to say, it wasn't quite what people had in mind for a garden. And there are a lot of rules. I mean, I'm incredibly thankful for the house that we got, and social housing is vital, especially in rural areas where rental is so hard now. But certainly, these people we started digging up the ground and pulling out the rocks, and people thought, what are you doing? So this next one is sow thistle. And this is our first encounter with the rules that go behind housing, like we were in. So sow thistle, milkweed, swine thistle, turnsole, hare's colewort, soft thistle. Hang sow thistle in the home to drive out melancholy. Sow thistle has similar healing properties to the dandelion. Cooling and astringent, it was traditionally used to regulate the menstrual cycle, encourage milk production in new mothers, and treat kidney and liver complaints. The milk can be used as a skin tonic or as a relief for sunburn. In Greek mythology, Theseus eats sow thistle to gain power before slaying the Minotaur. The whole plant is edible and high in vitamin C, calcium, and iron. The young root can be peeled and roasted, and the leaves steamed and served as a vegetable, but the plant will increase in bitterness as it ages. Sow thistle grows abundantly on rubbish dumps, wastelands, and roadsides. To turn this waste into fertile land, we have to start by growing soil. We find 4 wooden pallets and a length of blue plastic rope on the building site, which we use to build a makeshift compost heap. Then we wait and watch the fat pink worms as they turn our waste into what we need. It is not long before a letter arrives from the Housing Association. It has a traffic light picture in the top corner, highlighted amber, to help us understand the urgency of its notice. We have 7 days to clear out our garden of rubbish or be served an eviction notice to leave. I tried to work out what they're talking about. Our garden contains rocks, mud, and the salvaged wooden pallets that make up our compost heap. The pallets are the only things I can think of that could be classed as rubbish. I reread the 20-page tenant's handbook, trying to find the clause we have broken. It states that we have to keep the outside space free from rubbish. It also states that as the estate is a social enterprise, the landlords aim to improve green credentials and encourage the practice of recycling. I get the dictionary out. Rubbish, noun. Worthless, unwanted material that is rejected or thrown out. Debris, litter, trash. Recycle, verb, used with object. To treat or process, used or waste materials so as to make suitable for reuse. To alter or adapt for new use without changing the essential form or nature of. We cannot risk getting evicted. We have nowhere else to go. This house is our new beginning and our last chance. We are trying to make it our home. It is not just about affordable rent. This house offers us a chance to get back up again, somewhere safe to heal and grow roots. My son paints a picture that I hang on the wall of 3 smiling stick people, a rainbow and a blue door. Our new home, he tells me, and it is full of light. I write my reply, explaining the principles of permaculture, plant medicine, and the benefits of backyard biodiversity. I lay out our plans for the coming year and include a diagram of the hugelkultur beds. I describe to them my son's magical garden so they can see it through his eyes. I tell them about the grief and the illness that has brought us here. I tell them that sometimes what is broken can be beautiful again. Yes. Just going to have a drink. So all the way through the book, each chapter, as Wendy said, is introduced by a different plant, most of which would be classed as weeds, but they're wildflowers. There are a few trees in there, a few shrubs. And by the end of the 10 years, all of these plants were growing in the garden. So from nothing but rubble and a little bit of rough grass, we grew all of this. Okay. I'm going to read a couple of planty ones, short planty ones. Comfrey. Grow together, knit bone, slippery root, bruisewort. Hold comfrey under the tongue to still chaotic thoughts and help with grounding. Comfrey is used magically to support for healing. Comfrey is used magically to offer support for healing, protection, and endurance. Often referred to as knit bone because of its ability to knit broken bones back together. It is high in calcium, vitamin B12, iron, silica, calcium. Oh, calcium's twice there. I've just found a... Damn it. Silica, potassium, phosphorus, inulin, alkaloids, tannins, amino acids, and allotoin. Allotoin can be found in breast milk and encourages cell reproduction and regeneration after trauma. It can be applied as a topical remedy on sprains, pulled muscles, swellings and fractures, and on joints affected by arthritis and rheumatism. The leaves may be prepared into a poultice to draw out infection, or used as a wash to reduce the appearance of wrinkles and soothe sunburn, eczema, dry scalp, acne, calluses, and other skin irritations. Comfrey grows well in ditches, roadside verges, and wastelands, and is an excellent compost plant. As the days darken, we plant for the coming year and the return of light. I give my son a brown unmarked paper bag containing narcissi, bluebell, snowdrop, grape hyacinth, tulips, crocus. He peeks in at the dry brown bulbs. They don't look very tasty, he says, wrinkling his nose. They're not for eating. They are bulbs. The next year they will be flowers, I say, as I take a handful and throw them in the air. He laughs as they fall down, then takes a small handful and copies me, tossing them upwards. Now we dig where they land. If we plant too deep, the flowers won't show. If we plant too shallow, they might freeze. I tell him, kneeling down and pushing a stick into the ground. First try and I hit rubble. I prise out the broken concrete and shell with my fingers until the hole is deep enough to hold the tulip bulb that waits nearby. You put it in like this, big bottom first, I say, popping it in. Big bum, in you go, he says, repeating the move. Remember to cover it up with a blanket. That way it will stay warm when it snows, I say, tamping down the soil. We repeat this act of throwing, digging, burying, until all the bulbs are hidden in the ground. There is a magic to it that delights us both. Good night, bulbs. You need to sleep because you will be flowers next year, my son says before we head back inside, our hands sticky with mud and our fingers cold. Evening draws in quick and the sun is gone. We make cocoa and tea and curl up on the sofa to read. He chooses a book about a kind giant. I read up on the principles of green manure. As I watch him flicking through the brightly coloured pages, reading out words he remembers but does not know, I realise we are both quietly growing under this wintering soil. And I can't believe I've just noticed a typo. It doesn't matter how many times you edit something. So the book is divided into sections as well as the plants, and it was important to me when I wrote it. I mean, when I wrote it, it went over a long period of time, so it's not just sort of it begins in spring and ends in winter, you know. So, but also it was about the structure is also about the way that life, you know, it isn't as simple as that. Life doesn't give you one bad thing that happens and then you go through a transformation and then everything's better and everything's fine. You know, we go through repeated losses, we go through repeated challenges, and it became very obvious to me, well, not obvious, it became something that I realized in myself was that in trying to avoid the grief, I was disengaging with the life that I was living as well, which was, you know, the grief and the demands of care and the struggle of things was making me try and shut myself off because it hurt too much. And in growing this garden, I was able to come back into life, a bit like the garden came back into life. I was able to kind of re-enter into that life and be present very much in the moment, which was part of the reason why I wrote the book in the way that I did, because the act of writing was about trying to be present in those moments. So there are chapters that are very much present in my past, and then there are ones that are happening at the time in the garden, and they just sort of move between each other. And I think in doing that, in the writing process, but also in the process of creating the garden, I was able to discover the beauty of what was there in amongst all of the broken places. You know, whether that was the oxeye daisy that I found, you know, my son found on the construction site that we dug up and put into the garden as a sort of refugee, or whether that was just sort of a moment of real joy that I would find in something very simple that we were doing that counterbalanced the sort of the grief that was in there as well. So it goes through cycles very much like the garden. Have we got time for one more short one, Wendy? Yep. It's an April one, so I thought it would be a good one to end on. It's agrimony. Cocklebur, sticklewort, garclive, fairy's wand. Place it under your pillow for a deep and peaceful sleep. Agrimony is associated with protection spells. Used to help balance the emotions and banish negativity, it is helpful aid for those who bury deep feelings. Mildly astringent and rich in vitamins B and K, iron and niacin, it is commonly used to treat colic, urinary infections, diarrhea, skin complaints, and ulcers. The flowers have a light apricot scent and can be made into tea, tonic, and infusions. Agrimony grows abundantly in waste areas, hedgerows, and open ground. April's end brings storms and blows the blossom from the blackthorn trees. My son and I sit tight inside, listening to the wind as it sings through the letterbox. When the sun breaks through, we venture outside like field mice waking from sleep. Do you hear the bedspring bird? I say, listening to the squeak squeak of the great tit song that signals brighter days. I take up my spade and start to dig into the storm-soaked sod. Over the next 2 weeks, we weather the seedlings outside, bringing them in at night until they are strong enough to stay the cold. Into the soil we scatter gathered seeds of borage, cornflowers, corncockle, poppies. We dig dead nettle and water mint into the bog garden and gather burdock leaves from the beckside below the bridge to lay over as mulch onto the vegetable beds. As they rot, the leaves will improve the soil for future growing. These changes come slowly, but what breaks down will give us what we need, balancing out the biodiversity of our backyard from the soil up. Together we fill each space, each patch of barren earth, and then we wait. Grief lives with us, but I will not let it claim these days. Each morning we walk our small and winding paths, the scent of cypress rising under our step. My son hugs his trees and currant bushes, encouraging each living thing to thrive. Under the lengthening light, our garden grows. We welcome rain and sun as gifts and give witness. Slowly, the ground begins to change. Invisible underneath, our winter work feeds the roots. Leaves and stems unfurl, and soon it seems all life is birthing. Bees find us, butterflies and birds, calling curious about this ripening ground, as life arrives, reckless and determined to grow wild over what was once stone. Thank you very much for listening and inviting me along.
Thank you so much, Vic. Do you know what? You read so beautifully. Is there an audio version of the book?
There is an audio version, but it's not me reading.
Oh, is it not? Oh,
No.
what a shame, because
They
just read beautifully.
The publisher decided in the end, I think possibly because I live in Orkney,
Oh, well.
that the audio would be done by a voice actor, Fenella Fudge is her name. And actually, at the beginning, I felt quite upset about that because it's like, but I want to read it. It's like, but actually it gave me something back, because afterwards, when it came back and after the book had come out, I listened to the audiobook, and it was such an unexpected experience to listen to my own story told to me through somebody else's voice, which meant I was able to kind of be in the audience of my own story, which was quite disembodying.
It's such a strange thing, isn't it? Because this is obviously, the content in it is very, very personal, and it's such a gift that you've given us by making that story available to people and making those connections with people. I think that's a very, very generous thing to do as an author, to put yourself out there and allow people to read it and make their own decisions about it. I think it's an incredibly brave and very, very generous thing to do. And I think you have enriched the nature writing world because of that, because we don't see enough, I think personally, women writers in nature writing who are expressing their own stories. And I know that this took years and years and years to get to this point. So thank you so much. And thank you for coming tonight and reading for us and being our guest speaker. You've been wonderful to listen to. It's just been an absolute joy. And thank you to all of you who have come to read with us and to share your stories and share your creative non-fiction. And thank you to Helen, who set up the poetry film, because I wouldn't have had a clue to how to do it. And thank you to everyone who has bought and supported and bought tickets for tonight. It is so welcome. We are doing our best, and we'll continue to do our best with Spelt. And we're not going down yet. We've got plans for the future and lots of things that we want to do. So round of applause for you all, and for Spelt and for Steve and for Helen. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you go now to enjoy your bank holiday weekends. And I've had a really nice time. This is recorded, so I'm going to put it up on the YouTube channel ASAP, and I hope you'll share it about with people so that they can enjoy this as well. Okay, everybody, take care. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.